Have you ever been so trapped inside your own head that even simple decisions start feeling impossible? Because for me, overthinking was never just thinking too much, it was replaying conversations after they already ended, rehearsing situations that never happened, preparing for problems that might never come, and feeling exhausted from battles nobody else could see. And the hardest part? Most people think overthinking means you care too much or you're too emotional, or maybe you just need to relax. But honestly, I don't think overthinking is any of those things. I think overthinking is what happens when your brain gets stuck in protection mode, constantly analyzing, scanning, asking, what did I miss? What if I'm wrong? What if something bad happens? Because when your own mind starts treating uncertainty like danger, eventually relaxing doesn't feel natural anymore. Survival does. And for me, survival mode looked like living almost entirely inside my own head. Because once my mind grabbed onto something, it rarely let go. A conversation could end hours ago, and I would still be replaying it inside my head, wondering if I said something wrong, wondering how it was interpreted, wondering if I missed something. Sometimes it was conversations, sometimes decisions, sometimes things that haven't even happened yet. My brain would take one small uncertainty and somehow turn it into 20 different possibilities, most of them bad. And the exhausting part wasn't just the thinking itself, it was the constant loop. Because overthinking doesn't usually feel like, I'm going to think about this once. It feels like, think about it, analyze it, question it, doubt it, repeat. And after enough cycles, your brain gets tired, your body gets tired, and eventually, even rest becomes difficult. Because even when nothing is happening externally, internally, your mind is still running. And I think that's the part many people misunderstand about overthinking. Most people assume overthinking happens because someone is weak, or dramatic, or too emotional. But honestly, I don't think most overthinking starts there. I think overthinking usually starts as protection because your brain learns from experience. If life teaches you that mistakes lead to pain, your brain starts trying to prevent mistakes. If life teaches you that embarrassment is dangerous, your brain starts scanning for embarrassment. If life teaches you that rejection hurts, your brain starts preparing for rejection before it even happens. And after enough experiences, protection slowly turns into hypervigilance. You start analyzing everything, double checking everything, preparing for every possible outcome, not because you're broken, but because your brain thinks it's helping you survive. The problem is, survival mode is useful during danger. It becomes exhausting when your brain forgets how to turn it off. And when I really started thinking about where all of this came from, I kept coming back to the same place: childhood. Because growing up, school never really felt safe for me. I spent years being bullied, teased, mocked, made fun of, sometimes verbally, sometimes mentally, sometimes physically. And when experiences like that happen over and over again, your brain adapts. You start paying attention to everything: facial expressions, tone changes, conversations, small details other people probably never notice. Because part of you is always trying to avoid becoming the target again. And for me, that didn't stay in childhood. Later in life, I learned I was dealing with anxiety, OCD, ADHD, and other mental health struggles that explained why my brain always felt like it was moving 100 miles an hour. But understanding something and stopping it are very different things. Because once hypervigilance becomes normal, eventually you stop noticing that your brain is scanning for danger all the time. It just starts feeling like who you are. And I think that's where the hidden cost of overthinking starts showing up. Because when your brain spends years scanning for danger, eventually that way of thinking starts leaking into everything. Decisions become harder, rest becomes harder, trust becomes harder. Even simple choices can start feeling heavier than they should. Because overthinking doesn't just take time, it takes energy, a lot of energy. And what people don't always talk about is how exhausting it becomes carrying hundreds of possible outcomes in your head all at once. Eventually, you stop feeling mentally tired. You start feeling mentally burnt out. And maybe one of the biggest costs is this: overthinking creates the illusion of control. It convinces you, if I just think about this long enough, if I analyze this enough, if I prepare enough, then maybe I can avoid pain. But sometimes all that really happens is life keeps moving while you stay stuck trying to calculate every possible outcome. And after a while, surviving mentally can become so exhausting that you forget what peace even feels like. And truthfully, I think that loss of peace showed up in more places than I even realized. Because overthinking didn't just stay inside my head, it started affecting decisions, opportunities, confidence, and even how I saw myself. One of the hardest parts was decision paralysis. Because when your brain is constantly searching for the perfect answer, eventually making any decision starts feeling dangerous. I would evaluate every angle, research endlessly, compare possibilities, search for certainty, and sometimes still walk away feeling unsure. It also cost me confidence because when you repeatedly question your own decisions, eventually you start questioning yourself too. And over time, that creates something exhausting: mental gridlock, where part of you wants to move forward and another part of you keeps saying, wait, think more. What if you miss something? And while overthinking has protected me financially, legally, and physically in many situations, there were also moments where life kept moving while I stayed stuck trying to calculate every possible outcome. And honestly, that's probably one of the hardest things about living inside your head. You can spend so much time trying to avoid mistakes that eventually you start avoiding movement itself. And I think this is where conversations about overthinking become more complicated. Because overthinking isn't always the villain. Sometimes it sincerely protects you. It makes you slow down, research more, ask harder questions, look for risks that other people may miss. And honestly, as I mentioned previously, there have absolutely been times where overthinking has protected me financially, legally, physically. It stopped me from making impulsive decisions. It made me question things that deserved questioning. And sometimes that caution mattered. But I think protection becomes a problem when survival mode never turns off. Because eventually your brain stops asking, is there danger? And starts assuming there probably is. And that shift changes everything because suddenly you're not using overthinking as a tool anymore. Overthinking starts using you. And I think that's the line I've spent years trying to understand. How do you stay cautious enough to protect yourself without becoming so cautious that you stop living? And maybe that's what I'm still learning about overthinking. The goal probably isn't getting rid of it completely, because if you care deeply and if you've been hurt before, if life has taught you to be careful, your brain is probably always going to want to protect you. Maybe the real challenge is learning the difference between preparation and permission, because preparation says, let me think this through, but overthinking asks, what if I never stop? And maybe that's where so many of us get stuck, waiting for certainty, waiting to finally feel ready, waiting for enough information when life rarely gives us those things. And honestly, I still overthink, probably more than I'd like to admit. But I'm slowly learning something. Peace doesn't always come from finding the perfect answer. Sometimes peace comes from accepting that you've thought enough for today. And if you're someone whose mind never seems to shut off, if you replay conversations, second guess yourself, or feel exhausted from carrying thoughts no one else sees, I hope you know something. You're probably not broken. You might just have a brain that learned survival too well. And maybe the next step isn't trying to win the battle inside your head. Maybe it's learning you don't have to fight every thought that enters it. And honestly, I would love to hear from you. What does overthinking look like in your life? What does your mind keep trying to protect you from? And if conversations about rebuilding, mental health, identity, and the battles we fight silently are something you connect with, subscribing is one of the best ways to support the channel and continue being part of this journey with me. Because sometimes the struggles that feel the most isolating end up being the ones people understand the most.